If you knew how to spell football, do you think it would have been easier for you to write that page?
Yes.
Okay. So if you knew how to spell football, it'd be easier. What about if
I'm getting that you love to play Legos. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you're looking around and you're trying to figure out what table to go to.
This is Dr. Ross Green. I'm the originator of the collaborative and proactive solutions model you may have learned about in my books, The Explosive Child and Lost at School, and Lost and Found and Raising Human Beings. I and my colleagues at Lives in the Balance have been helping caregivers solve problems collaboratively with kids of all ages for over 35 years now, and many caregivers have found the process to be life-changing. There are still caregivers who wonder if it's really possible to solve problems collaboratively with very young kids, and that's why we created this film. You're about to hear from lots of parents of very young kids. You're going to be hearing about their goals and priorities for their kids, how they want to parent differently from or the same as their parents, their concerns about the world their kids are inheriting, and the skills they feel their kids are going to need to be successful in that world. You'll also be hearing about many of the same things from educators of very young kids. And you'll hear about how the collaborative and proactive solutions model fits into those goals and priorities, helps address many of those worries, and enhances those skills. I hope this film helps you appreciate the possibilities and come to the recognition that it's never too early to engage kids in the process of solving the problems that affect their lives.
I'm Alex. This is my son, Jamar. Yeah. Jamar is just under 1 year old, and he's very cute. Very cute. And I think he knows he's cute, too. I think he's just really very active, very curious.
My daughter is 3. She's silly and smart and trying at times. She's trying to find her own voice.
I have 3.5-year-old twins, Ava and Jeremiah. They are very loving and kind children, but very, very different.
I think he identifies as a boy, but he doesn't have a problem with doing things that are a little bit more feminine.
She's very, do it my way. I need to tell you when you're doing it right or when you're doing it wrong. She's very much a older or second parent to my son, which he does not like.
Such a good, sweet, funny kid that struggles to pay attention.
She is just happy, always happy. She wakes up in a good mood. She goes to bed in a good mood. There's no in between with her.
She's curious about everything and asks lots of questions.
They are both very strong-willed and determined children, just like my husband and I, right?
My daughter's a trier. She tries everything, and she loves to be a perfectionist in everything that she does, but it comes a little bit more difficult for her.
My youngest, who up to this point was referred to as my son, recently told us that they feel like a girl all the time. So it is at 4 years old, a really interesting crossroad to be at, and one I didn't expect at 4 years old.
She's just, in my mind, a great kid.
They're loving and kind and sweet, which I think is the most important part.
Oh, I'm the luckiest parent to have her in my life.
If you had to pick one word that described the role you feel you play in your child's life, you get one word. What is it? Navigator. Role model. Loving. being present. I'm going to throw another word at you. Ready? Partner. Partner in navigating life. The reason that's important is because I didn't say controller. I didn't say punisher. I didn't say anything about power. Partners collaborate with each other. And I think you start collaborating with your kid the minute they're born. What do partners do? Partners have wisdom. Partners have experience. Partners have values. Partners usually badly want to transmit that wisdom, experience, and values to their kids. If you had to pick a value that you were trying to transmit to your kid, what would it be? Curious learners and problem solvers. Oof, love it. Empathy. Huge. Others? Hard work. Confidence in themselves. These are not questions that people necessarily think about a ton, but I think that they are very relevant to everyday parenting. What our values are that we're trying to transmit to our kids should govern how we go about parenting. None of you said your top value was compliance. None of you said your top value was making sure your kids do what they're told. It's interesting. None of you said, this would probably be on your list somewhere, none of you said, I want my kid to be well behaved. How you go about parenting from the word go has a great deal to do with whether you're transmitting those values.
A lot of the stuff that you do to try and make your kid better doesn't really work. And what parents most end up doing is messing up the kid, right? With kids, it's like a plant, right? You put it in with some good soil, water it, and leave it alone, and it tends to grow, right? You know, plants want to grow, kids want to grow. So the goal is, let me not screw them up too much.
My mom and dad came from India, very different culture. My parents were very academics. They never talked to me about my emotional, social, nothing. And I really struggled with that. I definitely do not want to parent the way I was parented. I don't want that for my daughter. I show her a lot of love.
I think my kids are people. And I talk to them like they are people. Like that they will be adults one day and make their own decisions. I want to make them into like functioning, happy people that know how to solve their own problems or how to get help for their own problems. That know how to communicate well and have good support. I mean, kind of things I didn't have. There's a lot of older type thinking in Iran, the country that we're from, and Armenia, the culture that we're part of, that I don't ascribe to. My dad was pretty physically abusive, and my mom was very emotionally abusive. They really didn't spend a lot of time self-reflecting or thinking about any of their choices. Like when I talk to them about the things that they did or said now, they're like, well, I don't remember that. And I'm like, but you became an adult at some point and you had choices you could make. Why didn't you realize that that was not a positive thing to do to your child? And their response was like, we just didn't know. I don't feel like that's a reasonable excuse.
I want my children to be compassionate. I want them to be respectful and understanding and accommodating for people whose lives are different, whether that be the color of their skin, their physical abilities, their mental abilities, things like that. I just want them to be more accepting of things. I also want them to be vocal about things that don't sit with their morals and values. I think it's somewhat a characteristic of my generation that we were, when we were young, our views and opinions didn't really matter, and we were told to not share them. And I know for me personally, as an adult, it's hard to correct somebody if they've said something that I don't agree with because I was taught that it didn't matter. And I don't want that for my kids.
So what I want my kids to have is one, integrity. I really want them to have integrity and respect for other people's culture. Because your way may not be the best way, may not be the right way. It's just a way that you are aware of doing things.
Empathy is a big thing for me. So recognizing how somebody's feeling and then being able to acknowledge other people's feelings. And it's not always about what she's going through at the moment. And then just trying to create an empathetic person, but also a person that's strong enough to stand up for herself when it's tough.
And so a lot of what our parenting will be is learning how to communicate with her and make sure she's heard and that we are heard as well, and that we can communicate with one another even now before she has any words.
Are they going to be accepted, right? Are they going to feel heard, seen, valued, and supported, right? In any environment that they walk into and enter, right? Because I feel we create a safe and inclusive environment in our home, but how does that transfer when they leave us? And I never want them to be, by any chance, if anyone's to see them and make assumptions, right? Because they're not filling in the narrative of who they are, right? And what those assumptions can be, and those could be potentially dangerous. So I always want them to be able to be good communicators if there's a concern, so it doesn't lead to something unnecessary, an unsafe circumstance.
How do us parents transmit our values? This is the next leap. Through our expectations. Yes, you can model your values, you can preach values, but the main way in which you transmit values to kids is through your expectations. If life has taught you that working hard is crucial, that will find its way into your expectations for your kids. If life has taught you that empathy is an important value, that will find its way into your expectations for your kids. If life has taught you that being confident in yourself is number one on your list, that will find its way into your expectations for your kids. And if life has taught you that being a good problem solver is number one on your list, that will find its way into your expectations for your kid. If your top value is problem solving, you're going to be working harder as a parent than if your top priority was compliance. I think insisting on compliance, not that hard. You just, you run a tight ship if compliance is your goal. But if problem solving is your goal, then number one, you have to be okay if problems arise. In other words, life is not going to be seamless. You have to be, you can't be hovering to make sure that everything goes exactly the way it should, because you are open to problems potentially occurring so kids can get practice at solving them. You sometimes even have to stand by as you're giving your kid the opportunity to solve a problem on their own without you interfering until you have to. If problem solving is a big value, your life is a little harder. I think we get so caught up in the day-to-day that we lose track of the stuff that's most important. Not that dinner's not important. Not that the roof over the head is not important. Not that being in bed on time isn't important. It's just that they're not the most important. The values you're trying to transmit are the most important. And to tell you the truth, when your kids are older, here's what they're not going to say about you. She always made sure I was in bed on time. Never. She helped me feel confident in myself and in my ability to navigate life. That you'll hear. You're not going to hear that they got to bed on time.
I want her values to be, sticking up for what's right, having a voice to say this isn't right. I want her to be kind and to realize that it's not all about her. I want her to be a problem solver, to look at a problem with creativity and not to just let it overcome her.
Young black guy, it's difficult to, you want to stay physically free. You're in a world that tends to like to lock you up, right? When you're black, you have to make a decision relatively early in your life about what that means and how you're going to deal with it, right? How you're going to think about it. Because the world's going to think about it, so you have to think about it. So hopefully he will think about it in such a way that allows him to understand the world without being overly angry and overly bitter.
I want them to be able to verbalize problems that they're having. I was bullied a lot as a kid, and it's not like I couldn't say something. It's that I didn't know I could.
I want her to be a good human being. I want her to be able to be honest, truthful. For me, kindness, I feel like it's such a silly thing, but I feel like it goes a long way. And also, you're not going to have everything in life, and you're going to fail. It is okay to fail. You can still be successful.
My grandma she is very high-strung. Maybe that's where my daughter gets it from. She's very much a helicopter hover parent. And my mom is the same way. She's the one that comes in at 2 a.m. and put the finger on the nose just to check if we're still breathing, even as an adult. I would like my kids to have a little bit more, develop their own personality, their own independence without me telling them, okay, this is how you should be.
My mother was a teenager when she had me. She was 16. So she was not equipped to have this baby because she was still a kid. That was difficult for me. It was very difficult growing up with a teenage mother. And I think that's part of the reason why I was like, I'm not having children before I'm ready. So in terms of parenting, I do it differently, for example, than my mother. I'm much more gentle than she was. I'm much more patient than she was. My mother she was just in another place, and it's understandable. She was very young. And I think that I am intentional about being present with my daughter.
I think that as human beings, the essential thing that we need to do is to be able to communicate. And I think that a lot of times communication is thought of mostly in the way that you're talking about what you want and the way that you are able to advocate for yourself. And I think that we oftentimes neglect to focus as much on the way that we listen to other people in the process of hearing them and actually acting on what they've asked of you. And I think that in terms of navigating the world, I think that's essential. And I do think that that's something that you start now when you communicate with your child, and you ask things of them, and you also tell them what you need and what you're working on.
I think too, the ability to be able to think about how your behavior affects other people is really so important and a huge lesson to learn, I know.
You know, I would hope that he has the courage of his convictions, but also the wisdom to kind of reevaluate position that he's staked out so that he can be a member of a community in a productive way as opposed to kind of a less productive way. I think society right now is kind of drawing battle lines, and the people that can kind of cross those lines and reevaluate, draw from both sides are the ones who are going to eventually be able to forge a path forward.
If your kids are meeting your expectations, life's easy. Life is not hard if they're meeting your expectations. There's what we might call compatibility between your values, experience, and wisdom and your kids' ability to meet them. If you expect good grades and they're getting good grades, your expectations are being met. If you expect hard work and you're getting hard work, your expectations are being met. If you're expecting confidence and you're getting confidence in your kids, your expectations being met. Life becomes particularly interesting when your expectations are not being met. That's where the rubber meets the road in terms of how you're parenting. Why would your kid not necessarily go along with your expectations? Because your kid or kids, your kid is not a blank slate. Your kid was somebody the minute they popped into this world. Many people don't know that until they have kids. Before I had kids, I read about theories that said that kids are a blank slate and we mold them into a form of our liking. Then I had kids and found out baloney. They're somebody the minute they pop into this world, and who they are, their skills, their preferences, their temperament could clash with your values, experience, and wisdom. And that's when life gets interesting. Now, some of you have had more than one kid. Therefore, many of you have experienced that in some kids there's greater compatibility than others. Just because it's the same gene pool and just because it's the same household doesn't mean they're going to be the same. So now, here's the question. When a kid is having difficulty meeting an expectation, we could call that non-compliant. A lot of people do. I wouldn't. If you call it non-compliant, then you are going to be hell-bent on making your kid meet the expectation because compliance is your number one value. Do what I say. I say jump, you say how high. Some people might call that more traditional parenting, but it's still very popular. I would rather call it an unmet expectation. An expectation your child is having difficulty meeting. What I'd actually rather call it is an unsolved problem. Why do I prefer unsolved problem? Because it makes our role crystal clear. If it's an unsolved problem, we have to try to solve it. If it's non-compliance, our goal will be to make the kid comply. How do you make a kid comply? Usually through sheer force of your will, but often on the recommendation of mental health professionals, aided by rewards and punishments. Rewards perhaps in the form of a sticker chart, punishment perhaps in the form of timeout. By the way, I'm not recommending this. That's if you think that this is non-compliance. But if it's just an unmet expectation, you're going to go in a completely different direction. So now, think back to infancy, not your own, your children. There are infants who are easy, meaning they're not having difficulty meeting our expectations. And there are infants who are described as difficult, meaning they are having difficulty meeting our expectations. Did any of you have a difficult infant? What expectations? It's not fun.
It is not.
easy infants. They sleep through the night. They feed easily. They have easy temperaments. Difficult infants tend to be the exact opposite. And you sometimes know what hand you've been dealt even before the kid pops out. I don't know if that was your experience, but often even before the kid pops out, people are joking with you saying, you're in for a run for your money here. And then you found out what they were talking about. They were joking, right? It turned out to be true. What made your infant difficult? And let me just put it a different way. What expectation was your infant having difficulty meeting? Sleeping through the night. So difficulty sleeping through the night would be an expectation. Many infants have difficulty meeting. And because you are getting less sleep, your ability to respond kindly to that unmet expectation is also compromised. And it doesn't stop. 2-year-olds have difficulty meeting certain expectations. Actually, 2-year-old, we should talk about 2-year-olds, because it is around the age of 2 that something very interesting starts to happen. I would argue that your kid wants what they want the minute they pop out. But it is around the age of 2 that certain skills develop that permit them to go for it, namely language, locomotion. They can now move and they can now talk. And now they can go for it. Interestingly enough, it is also around the age of 2 that many parents decide that that's when they've decided that compliance is their number one priority. So now you have 2 clashing forces. A kid who's now going for it and has the skills to do it, and an adult who has decided that compliance is their number one priority. No wonder they call it the terrible 2s. But it's not just terrible for the caregivers, it's terrible for the kid too. Kids communicate to us that they are hurting. Kids communicate to us that they are struggling. Kids communicate to us that they are having difficulty meeting certain expectations through their behavior. If a kid is exhibiting behavior that concerns us, whether that's whining, pouting, sulking, withdrawing, crying, or screaming, swearing, hitting, spitting, kicking, biting, destroying, all of those behaviors communicate the exact same thing. There's an expectation the kid is having difficulty meeting. Why do infants cry when they're hungry? So we know they're hungry and we can feed them. Why do infants cry when they're having difficulty sleeping? So we can help them. Amazingly enough, when my kids were young, the most popular way to approach kids who were crying in the crib was to let them cry it out. Very interesting. I would say that is a form of insisting on compliance. Your top priority in that instance is either compliance or convenience. You're just not dealing with it. The kid is in there and they're crying, and eventually they wear out. The question that I have is, what message are you sending your kid when you do that? At a very early age, what message is being sent? Not empathy. Definitely not empathy. Confidence in yourself, I'm not sure. Because the only operative ingredient there is the kid is tapping out. Whether they're actually learning how to self-regulate at such a young age, I'm not sure. Whether your kid is learning how to solve problems by letting them cry it out, I doubt it. Hard work, that probably comes a little bit later. Your values determine how you handle things at every step along the way, including in infancy. All of that continues until your kid leaves home. What values your kid leaves home with has a great deal to do with what values you transmitted from 0, literally 0, till they leave. And that depends on how you handle your kid having difficulty meeting expectations.
You know, everybody thinks their kid is amazing, right? So I'm no different. I think my kid's amazing. And I think he can do anything as I do with my daughter. I think she can do anything. There's no life without struggle. I just hope that when the struggles come, he enjoys them and he grows through them, and that I can help him have the skills to succeed and enjoy it, you know? And I'm gonna try it, and hopefully I will stay out of the way, you know? That I don't make any situation worse, you know? I see a lot of parents make situations worse.
We want our kids to be a certain way, and realizing that you can't mold them into the child that you want them to be. I think that's what my parents struggled with. I think they had a hard time to accept me for who I am. I'm not gonna deny it. Like I struggle at times because even though you have the awareness that you don't want to parent the way your parents did, it's still inside of you, right? So there's these moments and I'm like, oh, I just did that. We have this idea of what our child should be, and letting go of that and realizing, no, this is the kid that we have.
I come from yelly parents. I struggle when people raise their voices. Really don't want that for the kids. I'm still a little scared of my dad, because when his voice goes up, just the voice terrifies me. No judgment cast towards my parents, but if I know better, I should be doing better. So I think I have a great opportunity to do that, and if I want to do my children justice, why wouldn't I do that?
I always say, your voice is important. I am glad that they can articulate where they stand, what their needs are, and if their needs aren't being met or not. Because I think that's really the crux of behavioral issues. When there's unmet needs of a child, right, or the demands are too high in terms of their capacity, that's where we see a struggle in behavior. So if we can clearly help them articulate their needs, then I find that that's going to reduce any behaviors or problems in the future.
I view children as people because they're people first. They have feelings, they have thoughts, they have interests. Not everybody sees children as people. They're just kids. But kids have so much to add to our world.
I think empathy is one of the, cornerstones of life. And a lot of people don't have it. Or if they do, they don't have the patience to sit down and try to understand what they don't know. So those two things, like empathy and patience, learning them in preschool and setting that up for the future, can really maybe change our world.
These young children are just little people. So they have big brains, they can do things, they have a voice. They have ideas, and they're very innovative and skilled, and they're ready to learn.
You have 3 options for handling unmet expectations. 3 options for handling unsolved problems. I call them Plan A, Plan B, and Plan C. If a kid is meeting an expectation, you don't need Plan A, Plan B, or Plan C because your expectation is being met. If your kid is eating the applesauce, you don't need a plan. It's a met expectation. It's not an unsolved problem. If your kid is doing their homework, you don't need a plan. It's not an unsolved problem. It's a met expectation. You don't need A, B, or C. It's if your expectation is not being met that you need A, B, or C. Plan A is where you are imposing a solution. Here's how that would sound with an infant. Because you are having difficulty settling down to go to sleep at night, I've decided that I'm going to put you in your room and let you cry until you stop crying. That's Plan A. Here's Plan A a little later in life. Because you are not completing your homework when you get home from school, I've decided, notice the key words here are, I've decided. Who's decided? You've decided. You are imposing your will. By definition, that is an act of power. None of you said that power was one of your primary values. But plan A is an act of power. I've decided you can't go out to play until your homework is done. Because you are having difficulty turning off the Xbox to come in for dinner, maybe your value is, I think it's important for us to be together as a family. It's the only time we're together all day. That's a great value. How is that value being expressed? Through your expectation that everybody be at dinner together. I've decided I'm taking away the Xbox for a week until you learn your lesson. That's plan A. That's about power. And here's what world history, as well as my work with thousands of families, have taught me. Power causes conflict. Having somebody else impose their will on you often brings out the worst in you. That's plan A. Plan B is where you're solving the problem collaboratively with your kid as your partner. Plan B is about collaboration. Collaboration brings people together. And then there's Plan C. Plan C could be a few different things. It could be you're just letting the problem alone for now to see if your kid can solve it on their own. You're doing nothing. You're watching closely, but you are not intervening. You're saying, let's see if you can do it on your own. And you're not even saying it out loud. You're just watching closely. Plan C could also be, you know what, there are so many unmet expectations here that I've got to prioritize because I can't work on them all at once. Plan C are the ones I have consciously, deliberately, and even proactively decided, I'm letting that one go for now. So just as an example, if you have a kid who is not eating food that you want them to, is not waking up on time to go to preschool, and is being very aggressive with friends to the point that they don't have any friends. And by the way, they're also having difficulty brushing their teeth before they go to bed at night. I don't know anybody who can work on 4 things about themselves at the same time. My limit is usually 3. In this model, we limit people to 3 unsolved problems at a time. Which one are you going to drop? Which one are you putting on hold for now until you get one of the other ones solved? That's your call. A lot of people would pick brushing teeth before going to bed at night. And what would Plan C sound like at 8 o'clock at night when you usually tell the kids to go brush their teeth? You're not bringing it up. If the kid brushes their teeth, great. If they don't brush their teeth, great. You're prioritizing. Not great, but you're prioritizing, which is great. Otherwise, you end up trying to work on too many things at once, thereby solving nothing at all. Or, by the way, you're deciding, this could also be Plan C, I don't even think the kid can meet this expectation right now. I don't think the kid is capable of reliably meeting this expectation right now. I'm working with a few kids right now who are not doing homework anytime soon. It's not happening. We are putting that expectation on hold for now because, to be perfectly honest, putting expectations on kids that we already know they can't reliably meet causes concerning behavior. So there's a lot of expectation management going on here. We have now established that your kids were different from each other. A lot of parents think that their job is to have the exact same expectations for every kid, which is known as equality. It's a losing proposition. You're not shooting for equality. You're shooting for a word that is very popular these days, equity. Equity means every kid is getting what they need. And every kid needs something different. How do you solve a problem collaboratively? There are 3 steps. They are called the empathy step, the define adult concern step, and the invitation step. Now, you might be thinking as I'm going through these 3 steps, I don't know if I could do this with an infant, and you'd be right. But the same principles apply. But what's interesting is many people think, I hear this frequently, can you solve a problem collaboratively with a 6 or 7-year-old? We do this with 2-year-olds, especially the ones who are verbal. But you start collaborating with a kid the minute they pop out. What is the main ingredient of the empathy step? Information gathering. Gathering information from the kid about what's making it hard for them to meet a particular expectation. Why is that important? Because us adults, we think we already know. And we are often wrong. So what I tell people is be prepared for jaw-dropping moments in the empathy step where you discover that what you thought was getting in the kid's way is not what's getting in the kid's way.
So I noticed that sometimes it's hard for you to keep your hands to yourself when you stand on line at the end of recess. What's up?
It's just because it's a little, crowded in it a lot of times.
It's a little crowded.
So I, keep forgetting to not put my hand on anyone.
You keep forgetting to not put your hands on anyone. Do you have a favorite spot to stand in line? What's your favorite spot to stand in line?
In the front.
Your favorite spot to stand in the line is in the front. Is there a time when you're more likely to put your hands on somebody in line? When is that?
When we get in a fight.
When we get in a fight. And is there something you usually get in a fight about? What do you usually get in a fight about?
Spots.
Spots.
I'm gonna write that.
You want to write that? All right, you write this one. I'm going to write
Young
that.
kids absolutely know what's making it hard for them to meet an expectation. They know themselves, and we don't give them enough credit sometimes.
When there's a problem with spots.
Many people think this kid needs to be a very sophisticated thinker, a very articulate kid to participate in the empathy step. The kid doesn't even have to be able to talk to participate in the empathy step. But if we were to say to the kid, I've noticed you have difficulty sitting next to your brother at dinner time. What's up? A 2 or 2.5-year-old is capable of saying, he stinks. He stinks. Tell me more about that. We eat dinner after he's through with soccer practice, and he stinks after soccer practice, and I don't like smelling that at dinner. 2.5-year-olds can say that. Most 2.5-year-olds can say that. Can most 2.5-year-olds let you know what's making it hard for them to meet a particular expectation? Yes. I've noticed you don't like a lot of the things I make for dinner. What's up? You put mandarin oranges in almost everything you make. And I don't like mandarin oranges. Oh. I didn't realize I was putting mandarin oranges in almost everything I make for dinner, and I think that I missed that you don't like mandarin oranges. But now that you're mentioning it, I'm now realizing that it's always the mandarin oranges that are left on your plate. I got it. Anything else making it hard for you to eat what I make for dinner? I don't like vegetables. Any vegetables in particular that you don't like? Anything green? Everything green or some things that are green? Well, I like peas and I like green beans. Everything else green I don't like. Good to know. Here's what's, as I said earlier, be prepared for jaw-dropping moments in the empathy step where you discover that what you thought was getting in the kid's way is not what's getting in the kid's way. Here I thought all you wanted was macaroni and cheese, but what I'm hearing is that I have broader options than that. Good to know. Make sense? That's the empathy step. In the case of infants, are you still paying attention and trying to figure it out? Of course. If your infant is waking up at 1 o'clock in the morning, your infant's telling you something. If your infant is spitting up food that you're putting into them, they're telling you something, right? If they're having difficulty calming, they're telling you something. If they're overreacting to noise, lights, sounds, they're telling you something. The important thing is to notice, and then the definition of good parenting, being responsive to the hand you've been dealt. Meeting your kid where they're at. And here's the deal. Plan A is not meeting your kid where they're at. Plan A is making your kid meet you where you're at. That's not empathy. That's not problem solving. They might be working hard at it, but maybe not the kind of hard work, maybe not the way you wanted to teach hard work. And I don't think you're teaching self-confidence by imposing your will left and right on your kid. I think you're teaching dependence, because that means the parent is the genius. And if the parent is the genius, what's the kid? The recipient of ingenuity. That's not confidence building.
When I was in school, it was the teacher. I just learned whatever the teacher said from their mouth. I just sit there, listen, memorize. Okay, they are the boss. I didn't have a voice at all.
I feel as a teacher, and I feel as a mom as well, because I have a 10 and a 12-year-old, that we're really getting to the root of the problem. When we're involving the child, we're hearing from their point of view, what is the issue that they're struggling with? I haven't really had many problems with the kids being able to articulate what happened then. If we approach them with a specific time, they are able to really go back in their minds and think about what was happening during that moment. And then that opens up a whole realm of communication where they are able to express their point of view so that they are feeling heard. And then it helps me as a teacher to just kind of understand what really is going on there.
I know it's not always the first thing to trust a 3-year-old's opinion of things. But if you listen to them, sometimes their ideas are really spot on. They have a lot to share with us.
Upon reflecting back to other times when I maybe have had a heavier hand in solving the problem than I now do, is that I've made a lot of assumptions about what's going on and what I think the problem might be. I'm wrong sometimes. And it's nice to know that because, the student knows themselves better. And if you're really getting to the root of the problem, and ultimately it helps, I'm happy to be wrong. But you need the student part of the conversation to get at that versus coming in with your own assumptions about what you're seeing and then jumping to a conclusion about the problem.
I've noticed lately that when you come into the classroom, you have difficulty picking a table in the morning to do morning work. What's up? Is there certain activities that you enjoy going to?
Yeah.
Yes. So what are some different activities that you enjoy doing in the morning?
Cutting the Easter eggs.
Coloring the Easter egg, which we did today. You enjoyed that today?
Yeah.
When we are doing alphabet work with the objects, do you enjoy doing that work?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Do you enjoy writing the letters when we have to write the letters?
Yes.
Is there certain friends that you enjoy sitting with at the table?
Yeah.
Oh, who do you enjoy sitting at a table with?
A DT.
Oh, a DT. So if a DT is sitting at a table, that helps you pick that table?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So when you're standing there and you're not sure what table, is it because you maybe don't like the work that's sitting out on that table?
Yeah.
Oh. And is it also, are there some mornings that a DT takes a little bit longer at her hook and you're waiting to see what work she's going to do?
Yeah.
Oh.
Just doing that empathy step is so amazing. Just taking the time to listen and reflect with the child has been really a huge game changer for me.
Do you enjoy counting?
Yeah.
That's the biggest eye-opening moment. When you've been kind of struggling with a child and trying to understand how to best meet that child's needs, and you sit down and have a conversation with them, and then you realize, wait, this is what it is. This is what was getting in the way. Sometimes it's something that I can't see as a teacher, and that's why it's so important to involve the child in this problem solving, because I feel like I notice a lot as a teacher, but I don't notice everything, and I'm not in their heads, and I don't know exactly what is getting in their way sometimes.
I think as adults, we just get so busy and want to get back on that schedule and get things done. And we got to do these assessments. And we just don't take the time to listen. And that's the number one number one thing for helping children to really feel valued and appreciated and understood.
By the way, what skills are being modeled, practiced in the empathy step? The empathy step is where your kid learns how to figure out what's the matter, a crucial life skill. The empathy step is where your kid learns how to express what's the matter in ways other people can understand. Hitting is expressing, but it's not ideal. Screaming is expressing, but it's not ideal. The empathy step is where your kid's voice is heard. And I am not a believer in the adage, children are to be seen and not heard. Children are to be seen and heard. The empathy step is where they're heard. But what are you modeling in the empathy step? Empathy. Listening, the purest form of empathy. Taking another person's perspective. If you want those things from your kid, you better model them. The define adult concern step is where you are letting your kid know why you think it's important that the expectation be met. What I'm always telling caregivers is, if you don't know why it's important that the expectation be met, then I don't know why you have that expectation. So this is very important because there are many caregivers who have expectations that come from nowhere. There are expectations that are for no reason.
My concern is that when you put your hands on other kids, you might not be safe and you might get hurt. Does that make sense?
Your concerns are going to be related to one or both of two things. How the unsolved problem is affecting the kid, health, safety, learning, and or how the unsolved problem is affecting other people, health, safety, learning. Believe it or not, the universe of things that we adults are concerned about fall into those categories. Can you believe it? Life made simple, right? But it's very common for me to say to a parent, so what's your concern about that? And have the parent say, I have no idea. I never thought about it before. I guess it was an expectation that I was just putting on my kid because I could.
My concern is that it's important to pick work in the morning because we don't have a lot of time before morning meeting. And it's something that we do every day. We do morning work every day, don't we?
Yeah.
And are the activities pretty fun?
Yes.
So I want you to have the experience to do an activity every day. So when you stand and come into the classroom and you stand there and not pick up work right away, you're not going to have time, right? Does that happen sometimes?
Yeah.
You don't. So that's my concern.
By the way, the define adult concern step is where your voice is heard. And the define adult concern step is also where your kid is learning to listen to somebody else's concerns. Great life skills. The invitation is where you and your kid are putting your head together to come up with a solution that addresses both sets of concerns. With plan A, it's only your concern that's getting addressed, and you're using power to accomplish the mission. With plan B, both sets of concerns are getting addressed. Because a good solution has to meet two criteria. Got to be realistic. Both parties got to be able to do what they're agreeing to do. Got to be mutually satisfactory. The solution has to address the concerns of both parties.
I'm wondering if there's a way that we can find a solution to you liking to be in the front of the line and not being there as often as you'd like, and me wanting to make sure that you stay safe and don't get hurt.
Maybe we could ask my teacher to give me the job to be in the line leader more often.
Oh, so maybe we could ask your teacher if you could be line leader more often. Now we got to see if this idea is realistic. This solution of asking your teacher if you could be line leader more often.
Yes.
For you, it feels like a great idea. Yeah, you're really excited about it.
Here's what I'm wondering, Soph. Do you think other kids also love to be line leader?
Well, there is a few kids that don't like being line leader and a few kids that do. But there's more people that don't.
Really? That's so interesting because oftentimes when kids tell me their favorite job in school, it's being line leader. And it sounds like, I'm wondering if that's your favorite job too. It is your favorite job. My only concern with that is that if you got to walk with your teacher in the front of the line all the time, I wonder if other kids might want to do that too.
It's fine because the teacher have 2 hands, so they could get to be in the front. So it could be a pattern. So when me, a different child, and then when every child had did it, then we would do it again, but just in a different pattern. But I would always.
For me as a teacher, I really need to do some good, careful listening. I need to try to get to the bottom of what that child is relaying to me. But then there's the piece where I, as the teacher, will relay my concerns. So the child needs to be listening to that. And then together, we're working to solve a problem.
I'm going to write solutions because we're almost there. And I don't want to lose that solution because it was such a good one. But I don't want to skip.
What are kids learning in the invitation? And by the way, their parents right along with them. How to think of alternative solutions, how to come up with a solution that doesn't just work for you, but that works for somebody else as well, how to resolve disagreements without conflict, crucial life skills.
I will pick which table has nice activities.
That has activities you enjoy.
Yeah.
And maybe has an activity where Hannah or Aditi is sitting?
Yeah. Or Callie.
Or Callie. Oh, okay. So we have 3 different friends that we could find.
Yeah.
So I wonder if the day before or as you're washing your hands, maybe you can think about who you would like to work with that day. And if there is room at that table, we could sit there as soon as we put our rock in. Could we try that?
Yeah.
I think that this is a solution that can work.
I've noticed the children feel very heard through the Plan B conversations. And that's been the biggest thing for me as a teacher because I feel like it's helped with my rapport with students. It just gives us that extra connection because they know that I care. They know that I want to help.
When we are talking together and trying to come to a decision together and a way to solve the problem collectively, sometimes I'm realizing, you know what, maybe I do have to ring that chime a little bit louder, or maybe I do have to position myself differently when I speak, because that little shift for me, which isn't a really big deal for me most of the time, could really help somebody else with their learning and their comfort level. And we have to be flexible for that as teachers if we're in the business of helping children grow and helping children to be as successful as they can be. Sometimes it doesn't only mean that the child has to make an adaptation.
And I feel that after each conversation, I'm spreading more tools, more communication skills to the students to help them solve problems when I'm not there, which is a really nice feeling because I have seen the language transfer from my conversation with a student to their interaction with their peers, and they're taking what they've seen me model and using it on their own already, which is amazing.
The good news is these unsolved problems are not surprising. If a kid is having difficulty completing their homework, they've been having difficulty completing their homework for a long time now. This is not a surprise. If a kid is having difficulty eating what you've made for dinner, this is not a surprise. They've been having difficulty eating what you've made for dinner for 2 years. Unfortunately, because life is busy, a lot of the attempts to deal with problems occurs in the heat of the moment, when the problem pops up yet again. So what I always recommend people do, whether this is an infant or a 2-year-old or a 5-year-old, is make a list of every expectation the kid is having difficulty reliably meeting. decide which ones are high priorities, and start working on them proactively. Some of them you're not going to be working on because they've been put on hold for now. 2 or 3 you're trying to solve together, but not just collaboratively, proactively. I find that planning is the hardest part, right? But life isn't so busy that we can't think to ourselves, here's my list, what do I want to talk with her about, and when am I going to talk with her about it, right? That just took me 8 seconds to think about. We're not so busy that we don't have 8 seconds to think about it, and I sure do hope we're not so busy that we don't have time to talk with kids about expectations they're having difficulty meeting and help them learn how to solve problems. That's too busy. If we're that busy, we're too busy.
Even though their personalities develop over time, I feel like there's something inside them that's already there. I can't describe it. It's weird that they didn't learn certain things from me, but do exactly the things that I used to do when I was a kid. So I feel like there's something there that's part of who they are before they learn all the things or unlearn some things or whatever. And some things just don't feel right. And I want them to listen to that part of them, and I want them to express it like they are regular people, like you would want them to do as adults. I want to treat them like they will be adults one day.
There are many people who think the world is primarily about plan A, and I completely disagree. I actually think it's a plan B world. What skills are going to be required in almost every job, every relationship? Collaboration, problem solving, listening, empathy. I'm not convinced that it's a plan A world. And yes, I could get pulled over if I get caught speeding. But beyond that, most of the world is about plan B. Working with people, hearing each other. Skills that a lot of us are worried are in very short supply these days. When do you start teaching those skills? When do you start modeling them? From the word go, and you don't look back. The earlier we do this with kids, the better. And here's what's interesting. We don't know how early infants understand what we're saying. Infants are like my dog. I think she understands, but I'm not positive. I know that my dog understands outside, walk. What do infants understand? I'm going to assume that that infant is understanding way before we think they are. And at the very least, I'm going to be talking collaboratively, even with an infant. Oh, you have a wet diaper. I wonder what we can do about that. Let's change it. That's how we could solve that problem. I don't know how early the kid is going to be able to digest that, but I think it's earlier than we think it is. Oh, you're very upset. I wonder, are you hungry? Are you cold? Are you tired? Let's figure it out. And now it's hit or miss, right? The first thing you do is you stick a bottle in the kid's mouth, and if that gets the job done, you were probably right. If it doesn't get the job done, you're probably wrong. Who are you completely dependent on for feedback about that? The infant. What are you doing? Collaborating, even with an infant. Because infants are very good at letting you know if you got it right. And they're very good at letting you know if you got it wrong.
So I heard you say that if you were to play with other friends, that it's easy to tailor it to the individual student because of the nature of the conversations and the drilling strategies that I've learned, and just how the whole conversation is laid out. It's naturally individualized, which is great because we've got a class of individuals.
You don't go through preschool without individualizing learning for every single student, because you have that developmental span where you have students who maybe are very highly verbal, and then you have students who are just learning to talk in the same classroom. And that takes a lot of intentionality, a lot of planning, a lot of consideration for the strengths and the areas of growth for each of the children. Preschool should be pushed up in many ways rather than 12th grade being pushed down into preschool, because the way preschoolers learn is really the way a 3rd grader is going to learn and a 12th grader is going to learn, and really it's the way adults learn if you think about it.
I think we've robbed children of just that joyful discovery of learning and reading. I feel like children fall out of love of learning. It's just brain development, and you can't rush it. And I think we're doing so much harm when we rush that process.
What immediately jumps into my mind is identifying where the breakdown is for the child. They don't need more of the same thing they're struggling at. They need, where am I struggling, pinpointed.
Collaboration is everything. It's so much, it's going to be the basis of their everyday life as they get older. It's the basis of a lot of their educational structures that they're going to engage upon in the middle school. They need to learn to work together.
It's really about respecting. Respecting the child as a person, as a human, and respecting what their needs are.
You know, sometimes we think, oh, things are worse than they've ever been, and it's not true. I'm always hopeful. I think that we're evolving. I think that we're evolving as a society and as a species, so that gives me hope. It gives me hope. I do believe that we are capable of solving our problems. Hey, Shorty, what you doing over there? Come here, man.